Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and one of the most exciting builds for the War Within beta dropped super late on Tuesday evening here over on the NA region, and I was able to finally get my hands onto some of these newest Shaman changes. Out of all the classes, Shamans as well as Rogues have seen probably the least amount of updates over in the beta, but now is the time for the class of Shaman to shine, as the class talent tree as well as the Elemental and Restoration talent tree have gone through quite a bit of a revamp. So far I got to spend a couple of hours playing all of the newest different changes and testing them out for myself, seeing if I can craft some builds out of everything that has been added so far. And I want to give you guys some of my thoughts and opinions as to how Shaman as a class is currently performing with this newest beta build. As per always, if you guys want to see more regular class covers like this over for the War Within beta, be sure to follow the channel. Otherwise, let's dive right in. So after spending what feels like an ungodly amount of hours with a build that came out so late, this is going to be my full takeaway on all of the different Shaman changes after actually getting a chance to play with them. So some of the more important talents that got added recently, like majority of the class talent tree isn't all that different, but some of the more impactful talents that got recently added, I would say, have been the upgrade to Healing Stream, which is Elemental Resistance. This one gives your allies 3% or 6% fire, frost, and nature damage reduction for 3 seconds when you drop, or whenever Healing Stream Totem heals an ally. So you kind of gotta time it. The Restoration Druid does have access to Cloudburst Totem, which gets reduced from a 6% reduction to a 3% reduction. For the most part, this is a decent passive reduction for your allies, where you may actually want to start utilizing Healing Stream Totem as a defensive tool for your group. There's no really way to control the totem, but it is going to try to heal an injured ally, giving him a little bit extra defense. This one actually felt quite interesting to play around. Season Winds is another one that's super impactful. Interrupting an enemy with Wind Shear decreases your damage taken from that spell school by 15% for 8 seconds, stacks up to, used to be 3 times, 2 times. So 30% DR, 30% reduction from, let's say, an enemy like in Necrotic Wake. There's a lot of enemies that cast shadow damage and shadow magic. Most of their damage is shadow specifically. So interrupting shadow casters reduces a lot of that shadow damage that happens all around that dungeon. It is so good. It's an excellent talent in specific situations. Traveling Storm is another interesting one. I think a lot of people are still going to default to Thundershock, but if you now want to apply Thunderstorm on an ally to give them a knockback and a better slow and a further knockback, this one could also be really good. Disruption wise, it can be a little bit too much, because when enemies are getting moved too far away, like let's say out of range of melee, that could be of course not that great for your group. So knockup is usually a safer choice, but this one is actually really strong if you can use it on an ally who's getting chased, and I think Restoration Shamans may actually end up opting into this one just for the group support. Stone Bulwark Totem, that's another one that got buffed by quite a bit. Right now, it does almost 1,000,000 shield once you initially drop it. This one does probably need a little bit more health for PvP specifically. As a totem, it's basically a weaker version of the mage's shielding, but at least it's better than nothing. And what I think they really should do for that 2-minute cooldown is give it a really hefty shield, or a better refresher shield that it keeps getting every 5 seconds. Because the totem is there for only 30 seconds, I think it should be a very solid cooldown, or maybe it should have some kind of a damage reduction while the shield is active, or some kind of a bonus effect if they don't want to make that shield too much. But it's gotten better. It's not amazing, but it is better than nothing, and you can apply 2 of them at once with Totemic Recall, which gives Totemic Recall a little bit more of an interesting nuance as how you end up playing it. For the most part, however, what I found with Shaman is your class talent tree has the same familiarity with all of some of the most useful utility in the game, whether you're looking for movement speed, roots, stuns, cleanses for curses, as well as magic effects if you're a Resta, off healing with Ancestral Totem, poison removal with poison cleansing totem, as well as your Earth Elemental. So you still have so much good utility, but now there's more of that utility, which I think is the bread and butter of the Shaman playstyle, the fact that you have a Swiss Army knife packed away in your class talent tree. Then as for spec-specific changes with Restoration, for the most part, you're not really going to notice a lot of things, but there are some awesome highlights. There's not a lot of them, but the few that are present are insanely strong. Like Master of the Elements change. This one adjusted where casting Lava Burst increases the healing of your next healing surge by 30%, stacking up to 2 times. Healing surges also apply Flame Shocks to a nearby enemy when empowered by Master of the Elements. So this allows your offensive abilities to empower your healing, and your healing to provide additional offense. This one is huge for that focused targets. So if you need spot healing, like in dungeons, this one is an incredibly useful tool and can synergize with so many other abilities to really basically bring somebody from 0 health to max health in an instant. This one is really good, but also provides passive damage, which is also really good in Mythic Plus situations. Ascendant's buff talents are also pretty interesting. Both Elemental and Restoration get access to these. These are going to be the same for both of those specs. Either Ascendance, that is a shorter cooldown, making it 2 minutes with first Ascendant, or Preeminence, which gives it a big haste buff, almost like a Bloodlust, and it gives it a slightly longer duration, making the 3-minute cooldown even stronger. That is a very strong one, and I enjoy playing around with it. That one can also synergize pretty well with not High Tide, the deeply rooted elements, if you want to get a little bit more haste value out of Preeminence. But I found cooldown reduction on this actually very solid, just to have an extra tool to be able to utilize when damage goes really, really high. A lot of the talent adjustment for Restoration, though, is going to come from its cost. Until you get to this row right here, you're not really going to see any 2 talent point nodes like Gravespeaker's Blessing or Undercurrent or Ancestral Awakening. You're not really going to get those 2 cost talents, and everything else is going to be 1 cost. So you're able to pick up more talents as part of your class. Certain talents that have been on the talent tree before, like for instance Lava Surge, for example, now those some of the things that become baseline for the class of the Shaman or Restoration specifically. So these things are really, really good to see. I think this is one of the better changes that we've seen for Resto. Also, you did get a slight adjustment towards the Spirit Link Totem. You can upgrade it to give it a 5% extra damage reduction for anybody in it, so from a 10 to a 15, which is a significant increase in rating situation, as well as a million healing split amongst everybody. So that could also be good for overall group survivability in Mythic Plus, for instance. But yeah, it's very, very solid as a survivability tool. But for the most part, Restoration remains to be closer to the same familiarity, which isn't a bad thing. This just amps up some of the different aspects of Restoration, and it's going to be interesting how players will end up adapting, or how players will end up picking this up within raids or within dungeons. It's hard to tell. I think it's a little too early to tell if Restoration is now going to be like top tier healer all of a sudden in all forms of PvE content or PvP content, but it definitely has had quite a bit of a buff, and it's going to be quite a noticeable change together with the class changes as well. The spec, however, that got the most amount of changes is Elemental, and there's a number of these. Right now, Elemental finally has access to a full-on, after a bit of a lag, Talent Bar. The lag has been awful, by the way, in this beta build. I don't know what happened, but they're really, really just... I don't know how they pulled it off, but it is abysmal right now. It makes some of the testing so much harder, just my frustrations personally, but yeah, it's a little rough one. So for Elemental, there's too many things to take a look at, but we'll take a look at them one by one. Like, crit value of your Elemental Fury can actually be further amplified with the talent of Primordial Fury, no longer increasing your crit healing, but crit damage by additional 25%, which is quite a sizable increase. You also have convenience of a different Earthquake. Either you can have an Earthquake that can be placed on a location, like how the original Earthquake normally plays, where you can either use like a macroed Earthquake so you can place it in a specific spot, or if you use the talented version of Earthquake, it'll just place it under your target, so you don't have to target with your mouse where you want the Earthquake to go. This one can be good if your tank is really good at holding a bunch of enemies together in place, but if they're constantly moving, then the Earthquakes can be placed and you can't really kind of control. Like, let's say a tank is about to pick up a pack of 3 mobs and he's going to move them over to the left. You could pre-place your Earthquake where they're going to go, but the other Earthquake that places on the target, it'll just be placed where the target is at, and then the tank is going to move them over. So I feel like if they change this so it's an Earthquake that maybe that travels with the target, that would solve so many issues, because then you could have one singular Earthquake or multiple Earthquakes that can travel with targets, so as they move, they continue to take damage. That'll be a little bit better. But this one is going to, I think, be better for like newer players, but I still think at the end of the day, you may end up playing the casted on location Earthquake, unless you just want to save yourself a keybind, but positioning is still going to be very important. Besides this, we also have a ton of talents to support a lightning-based build. This is going to be them trying to make that Stormbringer playstyle with the Tempest as strong as it humanly can be. It's an effort, to say the least. There's talents such as Storm Frenzy, where Chain Lightning and Lightning Bolt have a 40% reduced cast time after casting Earthshock, Elemental Blast, or Earthquake, can accumulate up to 2 charges. I was wondering how this talent will end up functioning when it comes to actually testing it out over in Mythic Plus, for example, but the way that it seems to work right now is if I drop down 2 Earthquakes in just a bit here, Earthquake 1, Earthquake 2, so now we have 2 charges, a single Chain Lightning is going to have its cast time reduced by 40% and consume 1 of those charges. So you can basically bank up 2 of them, but it seems to do a thing where whenever Earthquake is refreshing itself, it can basically keep refreshing that buff over and over. So as long as enemies are standing inside of Earthquake, you can just kind of spam cast it. I'm pretty sure that's not how it's supposed to work. It looks like it's supposed to be after you cast it, but it seems to keep refreshing it every time it deals damage. That is something to keep in mind though, if that somehow makes it over to the live realms. Lightning Conduit is another talent. While Lightning Shield is active, your nature damage is increased by 8%. A flat buff. Thunderstrike Ward is actually an imbue that you can put on your shield that gives your Lightning Bolt, the Chain Lightning, a chance to call down 2 Thunderstrikes that deal nature damage to your target. Not the strongest ability, but it does have a visual identity to it, so I'll see if I can proc it to show you guys. So every time I use the ability, there's a chance a lightning will just kind of... There it was! I'm pretty sure that's where it was. That is what it was. Yeah, so that's more or less what it looks like. It looks awesome, and I love all these lightning elemental abilities for Shaman. The damage it does right now is pretty abysmal, so it's definitely not really worth talenting into, and that may be changed in the future. And then the talent of Earth and Rage, which you might have noticed earlier. Every time you deal single target damage, Earth will just kind of erupt around you and spike at the enemy, doing a little bit of damage over a handful of seconds. Another aspect of Shaman that has also seen a big upgrade is your actual elemental, either the Storm Elemental or the Fire Elemental that you get to summon. You can now upgrade either one of these elementals by quite a bit. Either you can go with things such as Elemental Unity, where Storm Ally or Fire Ally will empower nature or fire damage while that elemental is active. With the talent of Everlasting Elements, you can prolong the duration by quite a bit. When an elemental does fade with Echo Elementals, you actually get to summon a mini version of that elemental, even though this talent doesn't fully function as of this moment. Ascendance is another talent that's also seen adjustments similar to that of Restoration. You can either have a shorter cooldown or a beefier version of your Ascendance, which synergizes really well with deeply rooted elements, because now Elemental can have deeply rooted and Ascendance, making Ascendance that much stronger of a cooldown, especially if you end up playing the fiery build. Ice Fury is another talent that's also got quite an adjustment. Ice Fury is now a passive. Casting Lava Burst is a chance to replace your next Frost Shock, with Ice Fury stacking up to 2 times. Ice Fury hurls a frigid ice at a target, dealing quite a bit of frost damage and causing the next 2 Frost Shocks to deal additional damage and generate quite a bit of additional Maelstrom. There's also another talent that can proc off of the Ice Fury, and I'm going to try to see if we can fish for Ice Fury as we go for it, as I'm going to show off the Fusion of Elements, where after casting Ice Fury, next time you cast a nature and a fire spell, you will also be able to additionally cast an elemental blast at the target at 60% effectiveness. So we got Ice Fury, we proc it. To use our fire ability, we use a lava burst. To use our nature ability, we'll use a lightning bolt, and then we get a free ele blast, just like that. It gives you all the same benefits of an elemental blast, and it can even proc with other talents. So I got myself crit, but I'm also running Echoes of Great Sundering, which allows a free proc elemental blast to make my next earthquake deal additional damage. So it's really cool. There's some awesome synergies here. They're very, very slight, and there will be quite a bit of an adjustment to play into those synergies if you do end up investing your time into them. But I like them. I like them a lot. And I got to test out the Shaman either as a Stormbringer build and as a Farseer. And if you want to test out these builds for yourselves in dungeons, this is more or less the build that I ran, and you're more than welcome to try it out for yourself. Although I'd probably switch out Tremor Totem for... I guess it's really up to you, whatever option you want, maybe Elemental Orbit. But yeah, that's more or less the build I would run. I would recommend trying this one out. I've had a lot of success with this one. Farseer, so far in testing, felt super smooth. That is the best compliment I can give to Farseer. It felt really, really good to play with. It overall performed better than I thought. It was also really good at the whole melee or elemental weaving build with fusion of elements and picking up Ice Fury and picking up full-on Ascendance build and buffing it up and going Mountains Fall, picking up Liquid Magma Totem together with Primordial. Honestly, you could probably combine it together with Totemic Recall if you wanted to, and then together with Ancestral Swiftness ability, and I felt like it created a nice amalgamation of a bunch of damage that just happens all at once. And I liked it a ton. You get a lot of procs, it's a lot of movement too. What the best part about this build, however, I felt, literally the best part, is the fact that you can be extremely mobile. Almost full-on casting while moving for most of your abilities. Most of your abilities instant cast. Setting up your combos is also very instant cast friendly. You don't have to stand still and chuck out a bunch of damage. And also with the cooldown reduction for your Spirit Walker's Grace, when you do need to move, that cooldown is always available there to synergize with your full-blown Ascendance windows. So overall, this felt really, really good. Definitely an easy recommend. This is probably the best version you can really play as a Shaman in terms of the feel. Not really talking about the damage tuning. And you can probably optimize this build a little bit better and maybe go into full-on Elemental Blast as a fire build. But for Mythic Pluses, it worked out really, really well. And it felt incredibly smooth to play. And most likely a lot of Shamans are going to lean into more a fire-heavy build in order to give themselves the best experience you could possibly get. There is a build that I created for Stormbringer, and if you did want to test it out in dungeons, this is the build that I would personally run. I tested it and it performed much better than I expected, though Stormbringer still has a couple of little quirks you gotta solve. Stormbringer, with all these nature damage abilities and nature damage talents, is a lot better. It plays a lot better. It plays a lot smoother, but it's still a bit rough around the edges. Mostly because of the way Stormbringer works, and I really dislike how Tempest as an ability works, because there's issues with that ability all on its own. So I'll try to see if I can proc Tempest really quickly for you. But the biggest problem I have with it though is how disruptive the ability starts to feel after messing around with this hero talent and Mythic Pluses. And here I got Tempest, because look, if I press Stormkeeper, my next Lightning Bolt should be instant cast, but because Tempest isn't a Lightning Bolt, it can't be instant cast. You have to hard cast it. So there are moments when you're getting fast casts of lightning bolts and you're expecting that ability to be instant cast, and in a moment's notice, it just switches on you to become all of a sudden a Tempest instead of a lightning bolt. So that flow, the rotational flow, is just completely ruined when it happens, and it's not a great feeling. Let me tell you, it doesn't feel that good. Here we go. Tempest did get procced, and if you know, if you end up playing Nature Swiftness, it actually allows you to use Tempest instantly. And I feel so good. And they gotta do something with Tempest. They really gotta do something with Tempest. They cannot give this ability non-instant cast as it is right now. It feels, I'm not gonna lie, pretty abysmal at times. And I feel like it definitely could be easily shifted if you allow Tempest to be acting like a lightning bolt. So if you have Stormkeeper, it just fires off instant cast Tempest, because then at least I feel like you have the plenty of opportunity to respond to the ability immediately shifting. But when you're expecting the ability to be instant cast and it's a hard cast, it breaks the flow and it feels not great to play. It may even get some decent numbers too, and you are able to get decent numbers with this build specifically, or at least I was able to with Stormbringer, but it's still rough around the edges. If they can do something with that Tempest, fix it, I think it'll play better, it'll play smoother. But the changes to some of these nature-based abilities, and even the way that they adjusted your mastery, so the overload damage is not as high, but getting overload procs with Tempest becomes even more important and more viable. They actually made it a little bit better in that regard, where Stormbringer may actually be able to utilize Mastery a lot better because there's a lot more of this overload potential from so many of your abilities, since overloading is not as easy as it was in the past. But as it being said, that's essentially going to be my rundown of Shaman over after all of these newest changes. Overall, I'm impressed, and the only spec, however, that didn't really get a lot of changes is enhancement. So I kind of want to pass it up to you guys in the comments down below. What are your thoughts on Ellie, Resto, enhancement, and the lack of changes? Let me know all the thoughts in the comments down below. As per usual, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, in the description of every single video and live stream, we have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly in case you want to let me know what you thought about this video or hang out with the rest of the community to discuss some of the upcoming changes. Join our Discord to become part of the community. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.